Hi guys. So today we have brought a very interesting topic. It is about the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. So in this disaster, we will discuss about the approach of the Russian government. At that point in time, it was a communist government, and how they handled the whole crisis. Uh, what were the important points during the crisis? So let's jump right into the video. I hope you would find this really interesting. So before we begin, we will also discuss about this photo, which would seem very mysterious to you, but we would discuss more about this towards the end of the video. So stay tuned, because this is very important piece of this whole nuclear disaster. So on 26 April 1986, there was a nuclear power plant disaster in Chernobyl, which at that point in time was part of USSR. This video deals about the post-Chernobyl impact of that nuclear disaster on how USSR operated and how it got dissolved. So there was an important role which Chernobyl disaster played in the dissolution of USSR. And this has come from Mr. Gorbachev, who was the head of the state at that point in time of USSR. And Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia all were part of USSR. So if we go to his from his foundation, the Gorbachev Foundation, which he runs, we can see that he has put this statement in the piece written in his own foundation page. The nuclear meltdown at Chernobyl 20 years ago, even more than my launch of Perestroika, which is a new Soviet state policy, was perhaps the real cause of the collapse of the Soviet Union 5 years later. So he is referring to the year 1986, and 5 years later in 1991, so USSR dissolved. Indeed, the Chernobyl catastrophe was an historic turning point. There was the era before the disaster, and there is the very different era that has followed. So somewhere in his mind, Mr. Gorbachev thinks that Chernobyl had a very major role to play in the dissolution of USSR. We are going to understand how Chernobyl could have played that role. Now there are several factors how Chernobyl could have played out in USSR. So there is a financial cost of Chernobyl, which was huge cost till date, approximated to some estimates 700 billion dollars have been spent on the cleaning up post Chernobyl disaster. And there was also an immediate amount which was spent, that was 18 billion rubles, which is equivalent to 84.5 billion if we do the calculation for the year 2025. So the long-term cost was approximately 700 billion, and the GDP of USSR at that point in time was 2 to 3 trillion dollars. So these are some estimates, but in some of the studies, it could range from 10% to 30%, and still there is a cost of maintaining the Chernobyl site, for which of course Ukraine is paying, but in total approximately 700 billion has been spent, which is a great amount even for a country like USSR at that point in time. So it included certain activities like evacuation of approximately 350,000 people. There was a loss of hectares of land, to some estimated as 1.5 million, and there was a healthcare cost for all the people who were involved, hospitalization, medicine, and for affected civilians. There were approximately also 6 lakh liquidators. So liquidators were the people who were sent on the site to take care of the site during the operation of cleaning up of Chernobyl, and these people were exposed to large amounts of radiation, and that's why they had to be taken care of. And still there is an ongoing burden on Ukraine for maintaining the Chernobyl site. Approximately Ukraine has spent $13 billion from 1991 to 2003. These are the figures which we have till 2003, and it is managing exclusion zones, while Belarus allocated 20% of its national budget to Chernobyl-related recovery. So these figures are pretty big, because in terms of GDP, if it goes to 20%, then it is quite a big amount. So after the Chernobyl disaster, nuclear disaster, there was political destabilization. There was erosion of trust in the USSR government, that government has not been able to handle the crisis well, and on top of that, the people were not informed on time. This led to erosion of trust. There was also acceleration of glasnost. So glasnost was a policy from Gorbachev, which meant that there would be more transparency from the communist government of USSR, and because of acceleration of glasnost, which was in effect in USSR, because of this, Chernobyl forced Gorbachev to relax censorship, as Foreign Ministry spokesperson Gennady Gerasimov noted. So because of this transparency, there was more information which was getting circulated within the within civilian population, comparatively more than what it could have got while the regime was pre-glasnost. So glasnost definitely added some form of transparency. Then also revelations about Chernobyl's mismanagement ignited process in Ukraine, Belarus, which were most affected there, and the Baltics, strengthening independence movements. There was also economic collapse. So there was a resource drain, of course, to handle a nuclear disaster of such a scale. There was a definite resource drain. The USSR diverted 68 billion from 1986 to 1991 to containment efforts, equivalent towards entire 1985 defense budget. So you can understand that the whole defense budget is going into the containment, and that is only from 86 to 1991. This bankrupted critical sectors like healthcare and infrastructure. Amount which was to be invested in the containment efforts, USSR had to withdraw this money from the healthcare and infrastructure, and people really saw that. There was also agriculture devastation. According to some estimates, 7,84,320 hectares of farmland and 6,94,200 hectares of forests were contaminated, crippling food production. Grain yields in Ukraine fell by 40%, worsening pre-existing shortages. Then there was also industrial palaces, because factories near exclusion zones shuttered, disrupting supply chain. The loss of Pripyat's infrastructure alone cost $235 billion in economic output. So Pripyat is the region which is near Chernobyl, and it was totally populated, and there was a huge infrastructure which was built for that particular city. But because of radiation, the population had to be moved out of there, and the whole business activity in this town of Pripyat, it ceased to exist, and there was also investment which was done in buildings and other infrastructure that was also lost. Then there was social fragmentation. So social fragmentations, one of the reason was radiophobia, because radiation is invisible and there was no timely information from the USSR government to the population. Phobia for a lot of things because of distrust in the government. So public panic over invisible radiation led to hoarding black markets for clean food, because they did not believe the government that it would provide them clean food. So they started to hoard the food from their own resources. Birth rates in affected regions plummeted 30% due to radiation fears. Human toll. Overall, 5 lakh liquidators were exposed to lethal radiation. Many received inadequate compensation, with 20% dying within next 5 years. By 1991, 20% died. Survivors faced stigma and crushing healthcare system. There was also international isolation of USSR, global condemnation. The USS and Europe revealed radiation level the USSR had concealed. So when the population came to know of these radiation levels from outside USSR, they started to lose faith in the government, and there were also some military implication. The Western scientists cited Chernobyl to argue Soviet nuclears, to argue that uh, nuclear missiles were unreliable and worsening the USSR's strategic position during arms reduction talks. So we are just trying to make a case for how USSR government lost faith of the population, and there was also a study which was done, and there were some surveys which were conducted just to gauge the confidence of the population in the USSR government. And so such a study was done by Center for Risk Research, Stockholm School of Economics, and this was done in October 1993. Perceived risk and risk attitudes in Southern Russia in the aftermath of the Chernobyl accident. So if you look at this survey which was done, you can see that there is an information source and there is a rank. Okay, so so all these information sources from where the population was getting the information was rated, and the survey was done in the in that population. And you can see that number one in rank is foreign experts, because they had lost faith, and then number two is foreign journalists. Again, it is coming out from the foreign media. Then three, you have foreign governments. Likewise, they have ranked all the sources. But if you look at numbers like 17, 18, so 18 is district Soviet, okay, that is from the Soviet government. Supreme Soviet, that is 14. Council of Ministers, that is 16. People's Front, that is 17. So in general, the population lost faith, and they had more faith in the foreign journalists, foreign organizations than their own government. This was one of the reasons for the fall of USSR, and this is how Chernobyl is linked to it. Because of Chernobyl, there were certain structural faults which people saw in their own system, and they lost faith in the government. Because of this, a couple of independence movement also started, Ukraine, Belarus. So post Chernobyl, because Ukraine was one of the affected parties and Chernobyl is in Ukraine, so the people of Ukraine lost confidence in the government of USSR, and they started asking for independence. So 5 years after they got the independence, and we can see that people there, they started asking, and there were protests asking for independence from the USSR. So now towards the end of 1991, on December 8, 1991, Ukrainian President Kravchuk, Belarusian Supreme Soviet Chairman Stanislav Shushkevich, and Russian President Boris Yeltsin signed a declaration that the Soviet Union as a geopolitical reality and a subject of international law has ceased to exist. So that was the end of USSR. So Chernobyl disaster was one of the reasons why USSR fell, because it had to incur a lot of financial loss because of Chernobyl. Not only that, it also led to erosion of trust from the population. Now there was also another disaster in Japan, Fukushima. So if you just try to compare, because Fukushima is a democratic government and USSR was a communist government, so we just try to understand how both of them handled the disaster. So if we look here in this table, Fukushima happened on March 11, 2011, while Chernobyl happened on 26/11, 1986. The time to public announcement, it took 36 hours for the first official announcement on April 28, 1986. The government of the USSR did not even know, the government of the USSR did not believe that their reactor had exploded, and that's why it took them a while to understand how dangerous the situation is, and they should announce. While as in the case of Fukushima, it was an immediate announcement from the Japanese government. Then also now if we look at evacuation order timing, 36 hours after the accident, whereas in Fukushima it was within hours. Initial 2-kilometer evacuation on March 11, okay, expanded to 20 kilometers by March 12. Now if you look at people evacuated in first 2 days, 49,000. Here the people evacuated in Japan are more, 78,000. Of course these are estimates. Total people evacuated approximately 1,15,000 in 1986, and then 2,20,000 more in the following years. In Japan it is 1,54,000. Area of exclusion zone, it is 30 kilometer. Here it is 20 kilometer. What were the causes? Flawed reactor design, human error during safety test. So one of the major causes for the management as well as the the cause of the disaster could be the way USSR government operated and it handled dissent from its own people. So the communist government generally are not open to suggestion from their own people, and they try to conceal a lot of facts, and which could be one of the reasons why there was a design fault which was not highlighted earlier in the installation or operations of that power plant. In Japan the cause was external, it was earthquake and tsunami. It was so in the Japan the cause was natural, it was earthquake and tsunami. Now the radioactivity release. Now look at the difference between the radioactivity units, that is petabecquerels, 14,000, and in Japan it is 340 to 780. So in Russia it was approximately 40 to 50 times more than what happened in Fukushima, and still we had 36 hours of delay in evacuation of the population. Now immediate fatalities, 2 were immediate fatalities, 28 from acute radiation syndrome. In Japan 0 from radiation, 1 worker death later which was attributed to radiation. Long term health effects, I think in Russia there are a lot of people who lost their lives. A lot of people suffered from cancer. We can easily estimate death in thousands, maybe 40 to 50,000 of deaths in USSR. But in Japan, no clear increase in cancer deaths, over 2,300 indirect deaths from evacuation stress, because there are a lot of people who were evacuated or asked to evacuate immediately, and there were a lot of old people there, and they were not able to face this stress. Then also there is one important parameter, public information transparency, delayed, secretive and minimized by Soviet authorities. Okay, prompt but criticized for confusion and lack of clarity in early days. So though in Japan the decision to evacuate population and all the information was released to the population immediately, but still there were a lot of allegations that the government of Japan delayed to act. Now return of evacuated population, till now Pripyat and the original exclusion zone, nobody has returned. Approximately 1,22,000 people have returned to some areas in the Japanese affected area, Fukushima. So if we look at both these governments' response, then it looks like USSR definitely some delays were there, and this could be because of the system, and also USSR hid a lot of facts from the international community, because of which it lost credibility in its own population as well as internationally, which led to the dissolution of USSR. So I hope we could understand how Chernobyl was one of the important factors in the downfall of USSR. Now coming back to that image which we discussed in the beginning. Now if we look at this image, we can see that on the right side some molten lava is there. This lava was formed when a lot of sand and boron was thrown into the nuclear reactor core, and after 2 decades all this melted and it started trickling down the pipes and it reached the basement. And you can see that there is one person who is taking the photo of this particular lava, and it is called elephant's foot, and this is still toxic. And there are some unverified reports that the person who took this photo, he died later. So this photo caused one life. This is still radioactive, and still there is a lot of cost which is being spent on maintaining the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. So I hope you like this video. If you like this video, please do like, comment and share. Thank you.